Hi, this is Veronica. Welcome back to Sew It Seams. Today we're going to look at block F-12 from the Dear Jane quilt. This one is also labeled as Starburst. I will be doing hand piecing, but you can choose whichever method you would like to use, either hand piecing or machine piecing. Okay, this is block F-12. Let's take a look at how this block is set up. When we look at the block, our main focus fabric is these solid triangles, and then we're using our background with these triangles and then even a smaller triangle. So for the first part, we'll kind of separate it out here. We'll go ahead and cut these triangle shapes, and then we can create another triangle to add on to the end here, and that will create a nice wedge there. For this one, it's a little bit different in that it has this triangle on the end along with this one. So what I am going to do is actually cut probably a full triangle piece out of this muslin is what I'm using, or whatever background fabric you want to use. And then I'm going to applique this triangle shape out of my focus fabric. So it's basically 2 units that I'm creating, 1 and 2, but I'm creating both of those 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So I'll have 4 units that I can sew together. Because I would like to get precision on these, I am actually going to get my paper scissors and cut out these 2 units. I'm keeping the rest of this intact so that it gives me a good idea of how it all goes together. And now I have my pieces cut out so that I can use these as templates. These 2 will be the templates out of my focus fabric. These 2 will be the templates for my background fabric. With this one, I'm not going to trace this part. I'm going to keep it as a larger triangle. So I will actually use this triangle for my template for both my focus and my background fabric. My fabric that I'm using for this block is orange. This is the front of the fabric. I'm going to trace my template onto the back. And there, I know it's faint to see. Let's see, can you see that? You can barely see it, but I can see it with my eye. I have my template now drawn. I will trace 4 more of these out of this triangle shape. And then what I'm noticing are the triangles are the same size. I will also trace 4 of these triangles. It may be a little hard to see with the pencil lines, but I now have my pieces drawn out on both the back side of the orange and of the muslin, which is my background fabric. I'm going to hold this up so you can see a little bit of the lines that I have here. Now the lines that are drawn on there are my stitching lines. They are not my cutting lines. So when I cut these out, I need to make sure I cut 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. One thing we do have to keep in mind, the triangles that we have on this block, all of the triangles are on the outer edge of this block. What I tend to do is cut the end of my triangle more than 1/4 of an inch. That will give me a little bit of wiggle room to trim my block to the right size. I have often run into issues where I cut them a little too short. So I made sure that when I traced my triangle, instead of just going 1/4 of an inch space, I have extra. And I've done that all the way around so that on all of the triangles, I will have that little bit of extra for when I finish my block. So now I'm going to cut out my pieces so I can get ready to sew. I now have all of my pieces cut out, and I'm actually going to kind of pair up my pieces. So remember, on our block, our solid focus fabric is paired with a background triangle. So here is my solid focus fabric and my background triangle. And then the other unit is the background triangle, the large unit, with a smaller applique triangle of the focus fabric. The first step that I want to do is take my triangle, my small triangle here, and since that's going to be appliqued, I'm going to take, this is my triangle here, I'm going to take this and fold it along that line that I drew on the inner side here, just on these two. I'm going to fold it and press it down with my iron so that it will be ready to stitch on each piece. So let me go to the iron and I'm going to press these. I now have my focus fabric triangle pressed, and here is my background that it's going to be sewn onto. And as you can see, there's the little triangle. When I put it here with this piece, you can see there's a lot of excess up here, but I would rather have too much on the outer edge than not enough, so that way I can trim it down. Now I'm going to use this cutout to help me place my triangle on my larger triangle. I drew the lines, and that's going to be my back stitching line. It's hard to see here with this light coloring, but I can see through my fabric. When I hold it up to the light, I can see through it, so I know where my lines are. I'm going to use this cutout as my template, so I know where to put this piece that I'm going to applique down. Make sure I've got that there. I'm going to pin the paper pattern there, and I can see through the back where it lines up. So there's my paper pattern piece, and then my fabric that I'm going to applique down. Have that in position. And then pin that. Now I can remove that paper pattern, and I will stitch it down on either side. And I will do that to all 4 of the large background fabric triangle with the focus fabric triangle. When I'm appliquing these types of things down, I make a very small knot at the end, and then I just start in the back and I make very tiny little stitches. And I don't worry too much about trying to hide my stitches. I try to make them as small as possible. But As long as the fabric is stitched down securely, it's not going to be a problem. I'm going to show you how I handle this corner, because the corner does have just a little bit of the fabric poking out. It wasn't a true 90-degree corner when I was pressing that. I like needle turn applique because you can use your needle to kind of tuck fabric in, and that's just what I'm going to do. I'm using my needle to tuck that part under that was sticking out. My thumb is now holding down that fabric, and I'm going to hold it down until I get through this stitch. As I'm stitching, I'm not worrying about that part that I tucked under. I am just going through my bottom layer and just barely catching a few stitches there on that top layer fold, right on the fold there. And I come up to the corner, and here you can see there's that one side, a really nice, relatively even. It's not going to be perfect. See, here's a little stitch that's showing. When you look at the grand scheme of it, it's good enough. Okay, I will continue stitching this one down and do this to all four. I'm now pinning these two pieces together. This is the focal fabric of the large triangle, and then the background of the smaller triangle. I am just matching the corners. There. My pins are all going through the line. So now I pin it down. And then I'll sew along that line on all four. It's late afternoon, so my lighting has shifted as the light comes in through the window, but we shall continue. I now have all my pieces pressed really well, and let's take a look at the pattern again. Now, as you can see, we've got 2 units together to make up each quarter. So now what I'm going to do is sew 2 pieces together, just sew them together into pairs, and we'll do it again matching. Got the point there and matching the seams going up. So when I sew this, where this meets here is going to line up with this point here. I'll make 4 units of this and then sew those units together. You should now have 4 sections that look like this. I have all 4 of them here, and when you're sewing them together, I try to pin so that this is the important joint right here. Where this joins together, you want to make that as close as possible so that it gets a nice, really nice, clean, even seam right there. So now that I've got all 4 of these sewn in bits, and I'm going to sew 2 of them together, the other 2 together, and then sew those 2 halves together into one block. And once that's sewn into a completed block, then you can press really, really well. I try to press really well between each step so that it's nice and flat and smooth. Once you've got that all sewn together, then you can press your block and trim it, and I'll show you the finished block. All right, the block is finished. It now needs to be trimmed. This center part is going to be bulky just because we have all of these points coming together. I've pressed as much as I can, but it's still just a little bulky. So that's we're going to have to be a little bit careful with that when we trim. But we're going to line our ruler up. Got the center mark right here in the center of the block. The diagonals are going through the other blocks, and then this is where you get it as close as you can in all parts, because this is the part of these Dear Jane blocks that become a little more difficult. But this one actually came together pretty well. I have a few little parts that I'm going to miss in the 1/4 inch seam. I try to adjust as much as I can, and looking all over, that's going to be as close as we can get. So I'll get my rotary cutter, and there is a bit of a lift, so I'm going to hold this as close as I can without moving. Oops, I just moved it. There we go. Trim that side. And then we'll trim that. Okay, I've turned the block, trimming the last side here, making sure that I keep it as still as I can. And there we have it. That is the finished block F2 Starburst. I hope you enjoyed following along as I made block F12, and hopefully it will help you to make your own Dear Jane block of F12 called Starburst. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below, or send me an email at sowitseemscreations@outlook.com. I'm Veronica with Sew It Seems. Check out my other videos to see how to make some other blocks for the Dear Jane quilt.